The Dingers podcast is on the air. I'm your host, Mitch. This is the big one, guys. It's 100. We've reached triple digits. It's got to feel good, right?
I never thought we'd make it this far.
We did it.
It's awesome. Mitch, I was thinking the other day about how when we started, I think we were on our phones through the Anchor app. I was just in my basement in a room. Pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we started this kind of. I'll say how we kind of started it. So every year, my wife challenges me to learn something new, and I always want to be into broadcasting. Always wanted to choose that for my college. Decided not to. Decided to be a teacher, and so this was my something new. And I was like, "Hey, Kevin, want to start a podcast?" And he's like, "Well, what are we going to talk about? What's our topic? What are we going to do?" And I said, "Well, we both love the Cubs. Let's do that." And started small and just went from there. So 100, and we're going to celebrate. Jeff has been talking a big game for the last, since we got to 90, that he was going to have a cupcake with 100 candles on it. But he has
technically it's a cupcake because I'm cupping it in my hand.
Okay. Yeah.
I like it. So he does have a cupcake, and his goal is to eat that whole cake during this episode. So go get him, Jeffrey. So if Jeff doesn't talk a lot, he's got a task to complete.
I'm busy.
he's eating cake. So but we do have a special guest here with us, Tom Prizeman. You may have heard him on the Compound podcast. So welcome, Tom, to the Dingers podcast.
I'm sorry I didn't bring cake. I didn't know I was, if you guys need plates, what else should I have brought? It's a party. I didn't know it.
A kazoo?
Yeah, we'll send you some cake, Tom. Don't worry about it, man. We're just happy to have you joining us. It's good to have a guest on for the 100th episode. As always, we're brought to you by Toppling Goliath, and we're sipping on it tonight to cheers to 100. Tonight, I said last week for the 100th episode, I will finally have TG. Not that I love TG, I just don't buy beer. I'm sipping on Dorothy's tonight. But as Mitch mentioned, we've got Tom with us, and you know him as the producer of the Compound podcast. He works with Jomboy Media. But Tom, you've got quite a bit of a storied career before you started working with Jomboy. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you were doing before Jomboy and how you got into Jomboy, and then I guess with the Compound guys.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think anyone would ever use the word storied. I think you're going to be the first and last to say that about my career before Jomboy, but I appreciate it. I'm going to put that in my Twitter bio tomorrow. I think as Mitch just said, I grew up wanting to be a broadcaster. I figured out pretty quickly, unless I was about 8'5", I was not going to be in any sport. So I was like, all right, I figured that out pretty early on. I was like, okay, what else can I do? I started broadcasting when I was 10. I started doing the local high school. And then it grew from there. I went to Illinois State. A lot of hopefully we got some listeners out there from ISU. Go Birds! And at ISU, I did a lot of. I worked at WZND, which is the student radio station. Did games for ESPN3 for Redbird Productions, and that was kind of a start. I'd obviously had a background through high school and before that, and then. During the summers, I worked for a variety of summer collegiate and minor league teams, the Hudson Valley Renegades. That was kind of where I first got started. I was a season ticket holder. When I was 15, I asked to start working there. I was lucky enough, they said yes. The Danbury Westerners, which was another summer collegiate team, started off as their play-by-play guy. And then went and worked for the Florence Freedom, now the Florence Yalls in the Independent Frontier League. And then worked for the Bellingham Bells after that as their play-by-play guy. That was the first time I'd done, I think I did 125 solo games on radio, which teaches you a lot. You sink or swim pretty quickly in that environment. And then after college, I was freelancing as a broadcaster. And I was actually, I don't talk about this a lot, but I'll bring it up here since we're all amongst friends. I worked. I got a job in Taylorville, Illinois. Shout out to the great people of Taylorville. Go Tornadoes! As the news and sports director for a small station in the town, a part of the cluster, and did that for about 6 weeks, and decided that wasn't what I wanted to do. Felt like I wasn't getting it better as a broadcaster. Felt like it wasn't, it was just doing. If you're not improving with your reps, they're not valuable reps to me. And so I was just kind of doing it to get it done. And I had some family stuff come up at home. I have a brother with autism, and it just so happened the week I moved back, he started having seizures and epilepsy, and so I think it all kind of worked out for the best in the end. And I was able to get a job, just kind of freelance broadcasting for a couple different companies, and then I went to the winter meetings in 2019, I guess 2018 going into 2019. And got hired by the Yankees. From there, I worked in their PR department. And then I joined Manhattan College, and they said, we're looking for someone who does video. And I said, you got your guy. And I really hadn't done video at all since I worked at a community access television station growing up as a kid, and I loved it. But it can definitely burn you out. And I really didn't do a lot of TV in college. And they said, we were looking for a video guy. And I said, all right, yep, that's me. Because, wanted the job, right? Kind of lied to them. And I said I could figure it out. And, I kind of figured it out. And then the pandemic obviously happened. And my hours got reduced in Manhattan. I really wasn't sure kind of what the next step was. I was still looking to kind of be a broadcaster first. That had been most of my background, but obviously difficult in a global pandemic with no games to broadcast. So I was like, all right, guess I'm going to really throw myself into this video stuff. And they asked me to make a couple intro, like a highlight tapes for when the team comes out. I said, why do we need those? We don't have any fans. I don't know who we're exciting. But which is maybe why I was the most popular employee in Manhattan, because I was asking a lot of questions. But I made those, and those turned out, I just had to pull archive footage because that was the only thing I did. So I found on YouTube footage, Manhattan beat Jerry West in 1958 in the NCAA tournament. So I was able to find footage of that. I was able to kind of pull this stuff together. And the coach, who was, could be a tough critic, let's say, said it was the best video he had seen for the intro video. And they normally spent, $10,000 on that. And we didn't spend anything. We spent nothing on this one. So that was cool. And that was kind of the first moment where I was like, all right, maybe I could actually do video as kind of a full-time career. And then I used that to apply to Jomboy. And I got hired in February of last year and been with Compound ever since. We've been rolling. That's probably a more longer and more thorough answer than you wanted, but
no, because you just proved my point that you do have a storied career.
Yeah.
I mean, going
there's
down
a
the
story.
line.
I don't know if it's storied, but
I don't know. Hey, semantics, right? I am curious though. So you're from New York.
Yes.
How did you end up at Illinois State?
Again, a lot of my stories you're going to see are long-winded and kind of convoluted, which is why I try to tell that many of them. But the shortest version is I went to a school in Ohio called Ashland University first. Was looking to do sports comm. Sports comm was kind of a developing major at the time. Now I think it's a lot more widely available. Because I couldn't imagine myself not working in sports, and that's kind of the one thing I've always said to myself. No matter what, I was like, I'm going to make it in sports, or I'm going to die trying. And been fortunate enough so far that's mostly stuck. So I went to do sports comm and found their journalism department. They said, this is where you need to be. And one of my professors there was a man named Steve Cease, who was an Illinois State graduate. He actually left before my sophomore year and then knew I was kind of in the market looking to transfer. And I was down to the University of South Florida and Illinois State, went to visit. And they got me. He swung a deal where they got me in-state tuition, and I said, "All right, that's it." I kind of, after I think a lot of people, obviously, you kind of deliberate a lot over your first college choice. The decision to transfer was like, "All right, we'll try this." And I already failed once. What's the worst that happens? I just fail again. So I went there, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. I mentioned my friend Mike a lot. He's a big Cubs fan. I'm in his wedding in a couple weeks now. I met him through ISU, and I met a lot of great people through ISU. And that's how I ended up as a Redbird. But certainly, kind of an unorthodox path. If it really wasn't for Steve, I would have never probably even heard of. I would have heard of ISU, but I would have never.
No, I mean it's. I mean, you definitely think of Illinois and Northwestern before ISU. Sorry, Redbirds fans. I mean, like I'm from Illinois. The rest of the guys are from Iowa. My mom's an Illini alumna. That's the
alumni.
Right, yeah. Alumni is actually the group. That's the plural, Jeff. Alumna
Whatever.
is, you don't have to get into it.
I had a friend growing up who thought that Illinois' mascot was not the Fighting Illini; they were the Fighting Alumni. Until he was like 17, and I finally had to
That's
be like,
actually
no,
great. That'd be great. Hey, they've had issues with it being the Fighting Illini, so maybe your friends
that might be the pivot for them, Fighting Alumni.
Right.
So
So
they field a team of only grad transfers every year. They have to have college degrees. To play.
It's a requirement.
That's great.
That'd be interesting, especially in basketball. Might be kind of difficult.
I think they could do it. I think in basketball you could find 5 good grad transfers.
It would have worked in the Badgers' favor this past Saturday. We don't need to get into it, but that was heartbreaking. The Illini crushed us. Anyway, Kevin, you were going to ask a question.
It's all right. So Tom, clearly you keep getting pulled back to Illinois and Chicago, and you got the compound pulled you back in and everything like that. You joined Jomboy in 2021, February 2021. Sir. And were you hired to produce the compound?
When I had my interview with Jimmy and Jake, they didn't want to say what it was. They said we have a podcast with a MLB player that we're looking to bring to the network. Would you be interested in working on that? And I was like, yeah. Obviously, yes, correct. Right, sign me up. Right. And so I didn't really know a lot more details until I got hired. They offered me the job. I accepted, and then maybe like 2 weeks after, maybe 2 weeks before I was going to start, there's probably a month between when I got hired and when I started, they reached out and said, "Okay, we think it's going to be the compound." And even then, I don't know if you guys listened to the compound at the time. There was about 6 straight weeks where they advertised a big news coming, and then never much in compound. Honestly, very on brand for compound. To tease big news and then hold it for 6 weeks.
I hear they have a guest next week. Big guest next week, right?
Yeah, no, Ariana's coming on, guys. For sure, I promise. So I think there were some negotiations going on. So even then, when they first told me, they were like, "We think it's going to be compound. We're not 100% sure yet." And then I was like, "Okay, cool." And I honestly, the first thing I did was text my friend Mike because I knew he was a big Hap fan. And I said, "Do you know anything about this podcast? Like, is it good? Is it bad?" Because obviously, when you get assigned something, you're like, hopefully this is good. Like that's right. Kind of all I could hope for. I'd obviously never listened, wasn't even really aware what was going on, and then I just drove around that day and listened to maybe 4 or 5 episodes. And once you listen to 1 or 2 episodes, by the way, Jeff, congratulations!
Holy crap, Jeff! That's 12 minutes.
That's way more interesting than whatever I was about to say. That was like, how long did that take?
You work, son.
That's on the clock.
We're just under 13 minutes.
I feel like diabetes is coming on.
Just to finish. So I drove around all day listening to episodes, and right away I was like, okay, this I think if you listen to 1 episode, you kind of understand everyone's roles in the podcast. And I was like, I think I could fit in, and that's kind of what I tried to do since then. Just try to do. It's definitely my instinct is always as someone who's a broadcaster just to talk, and so the biggest thing I've just tried to tell myself and. I don't think I spoke on an episode until maybe the middle of June, late June, and it was just trying to earn those guys' trust because obviously we don't record live, and one of the reasons I like not recording live is that it gives us the ability for those guys to talk freely, and then we go, okay, maybe cut this, tape that, whatever. And so I think there was just kind of like, okay, let's build some trust, build some camaraderie, and I think now I feel like we're in a really good place with the pod. I feel like we're, I think. It's my favorite part of the week every single week to do the show, and I say that with no BS. That is 100% true, and I think to watch it grow and to see the kind of audience we've built, I think is really cool. And I think joining Jomboy was Ian's a really smart business guy, and I think that was a really smart decision on his part. In part also because this is true. Ian, before I got hired, was editing every single episode of The Compound. Which I don't know how or why or when he was finding the time, but that was definitely a godsend for Ian to not have to edit the podcast anymore. That was the first thing we took off his plate.
And I don't want to gas you up too much here. I don't want to
fluff him up.
Give you too much. Yeah, but I've really enjoyed that. Like you've gotten more involved in the conversation on the podcast. Like the coolest thing for me, like I'm Hap's age. Like I'm a year older. I'm 29. So like the coolest thing to start was hearing these guys talk about baseball, like guys my age, but then also like getting their perspective as players that are currently in the game is super interesting. Guys my age, like my peers talking about it, like obviously they're living my dream, like hearing that, like even playing minor league, like I'd kill to be in Zach and Dakota's like shoes. Like that's awesome. But then hearing them talk about like, football and golf and the stuff that I talk to my buddies about. And now to have someone in your shoes in there who's someone like me who's not a professional athlete, it's like, oh, it's like I'm like living through you. Like, oh my God, Tom's basically me. So I like, and of course, I think it kind of started with like the Yankee watch. I think that was the big thing that like really started to fold you into the conversations. But yeah, man, I mean, your broadcasting background shows because you contribute a lot to the conversations. And I love that it ventures off from just Cubs baseball and it becomes a conversation about baseball more broadly.
Well, I'm glad you like it. I worry about what the number of people hitting the 15 button every time they hear the Tom.
No, man.
But that, as I said, I think one thing that was really important for me coming on and just knowing myself, and I think you have to be self-aware of your own tendencies and biases. I knew I'm someone that likes to talk, as you guys can tell. You can give me a mic, I can monologue. That's not an issue for me. So the biggest thing for me was kind of earning that airtime. I know that's a privilege to be on the air with those guys. As you mentioned, they've all done incredible things on the baseball field to have earned the right to have that audience. And I didn't do any of that. So I felt like very much every time that I was going on and if I was contributing, it was like, all right, this has to be like valuable stuff to the conversation. And now I think we're in a place where I'm able to have, be that fourth voice. I don't ever want to be more important than anyone else on the podcast. And you have to kind of know your role. It's like a basketball team in a lot of ways. But I do think I have that ability, because a lot of times we're also recording late at night. So I have that ability if they've played a game to maybe bring a little bit of energy to the podcast when, they're Ian's in Cincinnati and Dakota's in Omaha and Zach's in, Jacksonville or whatever. And they're all dragging after a long week of games. It's nice to kind of go on and try to bring some energy. So yeah, I mean, it's, as I said, it's my favorite thing to do every week. And the audience, I have to say, has been really responsive to me. And I've gotten some really nice comments. And that's been probably the coolest part is, you just kind of, when you start doing stuff like this, you kind of cross your fingers and go, hopefully people like it. That's right. All I can do is be myself and put myself out there and try to make the podcast better. And I'm hoping I do that every week. But yeah, to see the audience response, that's been by far the coolest part, to get any nice comments. We get a lot of them every week, and that's super cool.
Yeah. I mean, from the moment you joined, like instantly you were a great addition, and your voice, like I loved what you had when you talked about like the minor leagues, like had that little bit of like the changes within the minor leagues and just all that. Like you bring a different voice to the conversation with those three, and it's great. It's a great little just side piece, and it's a great addition. So we appreciate it.
Was the minor league, was that when you ranted? Didn't you rant about the minor league conditions? Yeah, that was killer, dude.
I think that was the first time that I kind of felt comfortable probably talking on air. I think every time before that, and it's still in the back of my mind. I'm always trying to make sure I rein myself in, and you remind yourself you're the fourth voice. You're not. People don't come to the Compound Podcast to listen to Tom Prizeman's thoughts. Having said that, that was a subject. As I just talked about, I worked in the minor league base. I grew up as a minor league season ticket holder. That got me my first job in baseball. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys about minor league baseball. And that was just a topic I felt really passionate about, and that was really cool for the guys, to kind of clear out and give me a lane to talk about that for 2 or 3 minutes. And to see the response to that and to see people kind of react to that was awesome. That was the first time where I was like, all right, I really kind of feel like I've kind of found my role, my niche on this podcast. And, even last week I get to talk about seeing Judge's homer and what that meant, or not seeing Judge's homer, unfortunately. Being there for Judge's possible homer out to the warning track, but just even getting to talk about what that experience meant to me was super cool. And I do love, I'm really appreciative of the guys that they give me an opportunity from time to time to let me kind of go off on one of those tangents and trust that hopefully at the end of it, it'll be interesting enough that the audience won't skip through it and that we can have those conversations.
Well, the Dingers podcast didn't reach out to Ian, Zach, or Dakota. We reached out to Tom Prizeman. So we feel like we're the winners here.
Well, I appreciate that, guys. I really appreciate you having me on.
What's it like working at Jomboy Media? I mean, we're huge fans. Like, we listen religiously. Like, Kevin and I work together. We drove to school every day for 45 minutes and listened to Talking Baseball. We listened to The Compound. We listened to all the podcasts. What's it like working there? It seems like so fun and just a dream.
I think that's it. I think I've been fortunate enough to have a couple of experiences before this, and I think working at places where maybe you weren't as happy, and you see corporate cultures that you're like, man, this is bad. It makes you appreciate a place like this so much more. And I try to say that to some of we have some really young people working here. I mean, I'm 26 and I'm considered a vet compared to some of the, especially our social team. And I try to ingrain that in them, that I'm like, hey, you guys are in a really, this is not a normal work environment. Like, you have to realize when we walk into this office and Jake's shooting you with a Nerf gun, that's not happening other places. And I think I've talked about this a few times. The day before my interview, I like you guys. I was a big Talking Yanks fan. That's how I found them. And then I was talking baseball and doing Jimmy's breakdowns. I was just a huge fan. And I was so nervous because I had talked about for months. I was like, that's the job. If I could join a place like Jomboy, that's where I want to be. And I kind of said that to people in my life. And, you say that, but you don't ever know how realistic it is. And then I applied and I didn't hear anything for a couple weeks. And I was like, all right, maybe that's not meant to be. And then right as I was kind of losing hope, they sent me like a project to do, and I did the project and I thought it went pretty well. And then I didn't hear anything again for like 2 weeks. And I was like, man, maybe they didn't like it. Maybe I'm not the video editor I kind of thought I was. And then remember it was a Friday, and I said, if I don't hear anything by this Friday, I have to start like moving on and like thinking about what's the next step. And then that Friday was when they set up the interview for the following week. And I remember the night before, I couldn't sleep. And I was like, all right, if I think I know these guys, that's the coolest part about a podcast is you feel like you're friends with the people, right? Yeah. I mean, if you spend 60, 70 hours listening to the same people talk over, you feel like you're part of their lives. And that's that weird parasocial relationship. But I said, if I know Jake the way I think I know Jake, what's he going to say when I get on the Zoom? And I said, he's going to make a weird joke about my name. Right? Prizeman's kind of a weird name. And sure enough, we got in the Zoom and he was like, Prizeman, the Prizeman. He started doing his whole little thing. And the fact that I was able to kind of predict that he was able to do that, I was like, oh, this is the same person I've heard talk for 60. I know who this is, And that's the coolest part about Jimmy and Jake is there's really no difference between their on-air and off-air personalities. Who they are on-air is exactly who they are off-air. And so, yeah, as you said, it's just the best place to work. And I hope I'm not sounding too much like I'm blowing smoke up anyone's ass, but I'm so grateful to work at a place like this, having had my past experiences, and it's something I cherish every day because I do know that there's not many places like working at Jomboy Media.
You brought up Talking Yanks. Yanks all the way this year?
Ooh, I mean, if we're going to need Scotty Stage to be incredible, the back end of the bullpen is alarming. Outside of Scotty and Wandy Peralta, maybe I don't know who else I trust. Ron Marinaccio, who was a name that I don't think most Yankee fans don't even know, got hurt yesterday, and it's like, oh no, Ron Marinaccio is hurt because he's like our third best reliever right now.
Yeah, Marinaccio came out of nowhere like mid-season and looked good.
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest skill the Yankees have had is producing these back end of the bullpen guys seemingly out of nowhere. I mean, you even look at Garrett Whitlock, a guy in the Red Sox. I mean, that's a guy that the Yankees didn't even think they had value for because they had so many other relievers that they've been able to produce. You look at someone like Clay Holmes, what he's been able to do since coming over in that trade last year. Loaisiga was a guy that was not really a heralded prospect. They've turned into a back-end guy. And then even someone like Scotty, I mean, that was bringing it back to the Cubs, that was a very interesting trade, I think, for both. It's one of the few trades I've really liked for both teams. Now, I'm biased because obviously I love Scotty so much. And I was actually a little disappointed he got traded to the Yankees, if only because he was my favorite reliever that nobody had heard about. And I loved watching him pitch, man. And I knew what we were getting. I knew he was going to be a really locked down back end of the bullpen kind of guy. But you look at what they gave up, that's a valuable piece for the Cubs to have. And I think it is a trade that really makes sense for both teams. Yankees window is right now. You have someone like Aaron Judge having the season he's having. You don't know what's guaranteed with him in the future. Really, you wish they'd locked him down before the season. I think that's
Right.
the universal feeling.
We can attest to that. As
We know
the
feeling.
We know how
It's
that
all
goes.
about that.
Yeah, the weird thing, and I mean, I'll be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Is I don't necessarily think outside of Rizzo, maybe Rizzo's the one guy you could say maybe the Cubs. He could have been the captain. All the reasons you would bring back Rizzo. I don't feel like letting Baez or Bryant go has really been that bad for the Cubs.
No.
Especially with like Peter Crow Armstrong and the return they got in the Baez trade. I mean, and obviously both those guys have had disappointing years, and maybe they'll have better years next year. And you hate to lose anyone off that 16 team, being in the state of Illinois in 2016. You just know. I haven't got to talk about this in Compound, but I interviewed one of my favorite stories I did when I worked at the campus TV station. I reached out to all the local nursing homes and all the senior living centers and just said, do you have anyone who would want to talk about the Cubs World Series win? And those places, surprisingly, not great at checking their email. So I think it was the next semester when they'd email me back. And I don't even think I was doing TV anymore. But I said, hey, do you guys want me to go do this story? I'm interested in doing it. And it was this wonderful old man who lived in Lincoln, Illinois, was a postman. He talked about walking around with the radio. And it was interesting because I don't think he quite understood I think he just thought we were going to talk about Cubs baseball. And I was happy to do that, but obviously we were looking for a specific story for TV. But we must have talked for probably 2 hours and only 30 seconds if it made TV. But he talked about, going to visit the gravesite of his best friend and telling him that he won, and it still now gets me emotional. I mean, you think about something like that. You talk about going to his first game at Wrigley Field in 1932. And,
Wow.
he passed on actually not too long after. I think it was maybe the year after. I think he passed away right before his birthday the following year. And he was a 96-year-old man. And a story like that sticks with you forever. And it reminds you of, they talked about last week with the Judge story. It reminds you why people love baseball. Those are the stories of your grandfather watched, the Cubs in 1932 at Wrigley Field. And now here you are watching all these years later, I mean, that's that, so I don't even know where we started with this. This is the problem with my monologues and probably why I don't do it that often on Compound. I can lose my train of thought.
Just
But
keep going.
that kind of story sticks with you.
No, I think that's great. I think that's spot on, and I think a lot of Cubs fans have story. I know I do with my you say visiting the gravesite. I lost my dad young, and he's the one that instilled Cubs fandom in me. And I had friends telling me that I found out months after the fact that my dad was the first person they thought of, and they went to the site, and it was sure enough it was littered with flowers and Cubs stuff. We were talking about Judge. We were talking about the Yankees' chances.
Well, I want to stop tell Tom about Jake's dad. So
yeah, I want to hear this.
So Jake's, if you remember Kerry Wood's 20 strikeout game in the K signs in the outfield, his dad was the one who started the K signs and got that going
so cool.
out in the outfield. So
That's
it's
so awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
that to
He
think
skipped
about.
work and everything.
yeah.
Yeah, he got in trouble. He got in trouble because he showed up in Sports Illustrated. His name was in Sports Illustrated, and his boss found out that he had skipped
You were sick that
work.
day.
Yeah.
He was really sick. He had a case of Cubs fever.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Somehow he knew. No, it's cool, and it's kind of launched this he gave me a little bit of credibility, being the K guy's son as I went into Cubs Twitter. But no, it's been great. It's been great. But I thanks for that, plugging that, Mitch. It's always fun bringing him up. But I want to bring it back to extending the players, and we've obviously talked about it a lot over the past year plus on the podcast. Yeah, a couple of years. I agree. I think Rizzo, and I mean, obviously you see the season that he's had. I mean, the batting average is low, but everything else is great. And I don't know, he's adjusted his game to Yankee Stadium, I think, and that's why you see maybe the low batting average. But I also would argue, I loved Chris Bryant. I think we can all. I mean, we loved all those guys, but I think the big thing for me with Chris Bryant was, so you hear a lot about, like, I've heard stories about players going to Colorado or leaving Colorado, and like the going up to altitude and then down to sea level, like for different series, like that's why you see it's the body handles it differently. And so, like, I think that maybe contribute. We haven't talked about this actually on the podcast, but I think that kind of contributed to Bryant's injuries this season. Granted, he's had back problems, like shoulder problems his left shoulder problem in the past. Yep. But I think being at the high altitude maybe has just exacerbated the problem. So if he'd signed anywhere else, I wouldn't have wanted the Cubs to sign him to the contract that he got. Like, I can't believe, good for him for securing that bag, but. Yeah, Rizzo and Bryant are definitely the guys that I wish we could have held on to.
Rizzo, it's still, even now, weird to watch him as a Yankee.
Totally.
He just feels like one of, it's like watching Montana on the Chiefs or something. It just feels wrong. It'll be interesting. That, obviously, my opinion on that might change if he's able to do some stuff in the playoffs. Then we might feel a little bit differently. But yeah, I mean, Rizzo's the one guy that does feel like should have put the C on his jersey. All the stuff that I don't think I'm saying anything new here to a bunch of Cubs fans, but it's putting a C on his jersey and building a statue for that kind of. That should have been Ernie Rizzo. He should have been on the list of one of those guys. And it is, we had him on compound. And I think it was kind of news when he said on compound that he was moving out of a Chicago apartment, and obviously took that as him not coming back to the Cubs, but. I was surprised that people thought he would ever go back to the Cubs. I mean, just the way they treated someone like that, that's, I think, the one guy where it's like, even if it wasn't for baseball reasons, that was the guy you need to keep just for morale reasons, if I'm a Cubs fan right now, I know they're on a little bit of a winning streak right now. I know they've been playing better here in the second half of the year, and there's some stuff to be excited about. But apologies to Adrian Sampson. Like, I don't think that's a guy who's really going to be a contributor for a, division winning playoff bound team anytime soon. And, you look at some of the metrics on some of those guys who have had a lot of success and you go, is this real or is this product of a soft schedule and whatever else? I just hope for Cubs fans' sake, my best friend, Mike, I've talked about him a lot. This is a man who, after the 2016 World Series, would go to every party and put on "Go Cubs Go." I've heard it 10,000 times when I'm drunk because of him. And when we went to the Cubs game last year, I went to see Ian. I went out to visit him. I said, "Do you want to go to a Cubs game?" He was like, "No, not really." And to see someone like that in 5 years go from demanding we put on "Go Cubs Go" at every party we went to being like indifferent if we went to a Cubs game, I think says, a lot about what's happened over the past couple of years. And I hope there's a way to repair that relationship, because obviously the Ricketts family did bring the Cubs a World Series, but what's happened since then, I think, has been disappointing. And, I don't want to speak for Ian, and let me be clear before I say anything. I don't speak for Ian. This is my own opinion. But if the Cubs don't keep someone like Ian Happ, who's a 28-year-old all-star, I think it says a lot about what they're trying to build. And if you're not trying to build with that kind of player, especially someone like Ian, who's done so much in the community, continues to do a lot, obviously I'm biased towards Ian, but that's the kind of guy that you would think teams would want to be re-signing. And the fact that, to my knowledge, I have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. I don't speak for Ian again, but that deal hasn't come out would concern me if I was a Cubs fan. And obviously, you think about Wilson too. I mean, I that's the one where I'm really like, if they get rid of Wilson, I mean, we talked about it on compound. I mean, I think the fact that they kept Wilson Contreras and are probably just going to get whatever compensation pick for him, and that's the outcome of this entire thing, is really sad. And that's not the outcome I think Wilson wanted. I don't think it's what the outcome the Cubs wanted. I don't think anyone's going to be satisfied if that's the outcome of Wilson Contreras on the Cubs, because he deserved probably better than that. And the team should have, if they were going to not re-sign him, which I would be surprised if they did, deserve to get more for him. And it's really an all-around kind of lose for everybody involved.
It's really perplexing, Tom, and it's interesting getting your perspective too, because I think you really hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think all Cubs fans would agree, and I mean, coming around to the trade deadline this year with the team's performance, we kind of knew what to expect. But then I think when Ian's name started to get tossed around, it was like, to me, it kind of felt like one of those things where it was like, well, they were kind of dangling Ian's name because, like you said, he's a player with all these intangibles that you talk about, and he makes sense for a team to build around. He's got another year of contract control. Can you you prefaced it like you can't speak for Ian, and I totally understand. I don't want to like ask any uncomfortable questions, but can you like speak to kind of like anything that was going on behind the scenes? Like what would have happened to the, I mean, obviously the compound would have kept going, but like what was the mood kind of like with everybody, coming up to the trade deadline? It was weird hearing like Zach and Dakota being like, oh, so you're going to be a Yankee? Like that hurt me. Like that really hurt me.
And now Dakota mentioned that like 2 months before. It was like, come on now. Don't be doing that.
It was definitely, I mean, here's what I'll say about it. It was definitely an odd time, especially as someone, a lot of what I do here at work is centered around the compound and it's centered around Ian Happ. And you thought about if he gets traded, okay, what does that mean for the podcast? And honestly, Ian and I never had a conversation about it. I didn't feel like it was my place with all the stuff he had going on in his life to burden him with another discussion about something that we didn't even know for sure was going to happen. Obviously, it didn't. I will say I was surprised he wasn't traded. That's just, again, that's not based on any inside information. That's just my opinion as a fan, that I was surprised that they didn't trade him when at the deadline. I'm glad for Cubs fans they didn't. I hope it gives them an opportunity to re-sign him in the offseason. But yeah, I mean, that whole time, I think a lot of people forget about these guys are human beings, and you think about and you interact with, someone like Ian, you just see how much it was weighing on him. And I think I was so impressed with how he handled the media. I thought his answers and how he handled it publicly were about as good as it can be. But honestly, he and I really didn't have any conversations about it because I knew how many other people in his life were having that conversation with him. And it just was like, for me, it was like, okay, if it comes to that, we'll figure out what we're going to do. I don't think it was going to change the podcast. I mean, it would be different that he wasn't on the Cubs, and you wonder about, what percent of the listenership carries over. What, hopefully, I was always like, if he gets traded, hopefully it's to a good fan base that has, would be interested in listening to a podcast. I won't lie, it would have been cool if he got traded to the Yankees. If there was a place that was going to get trade for him. I'm not a huge Andrew Benintendi fan for a multitude of reasons, and I was like, if we're going to trade for Andrew Benintendi, let's just trade for Ian Happ. But I'm glad for Cubs fans. I think the thing that's true, throughout all this is Ian wanted to be a Cub the whole time. He didn't want to go anywhere else. And I think, obviously I nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, but I can speak to that Ian loves being a Chicago Cub. And that is like sincere down to like the core of his being. So I think, it was definitely though a really, really weird time. And it was even people in our office were kind of talking to me and asking me, what do I think? What do you know? People feeling you out. And the whole time I really didn't have any inside information. I was just kind of like everyone else going, all right, let's, I remember that the trade deadline day. Up until then, I kind of thought he was getting traded. And when it got to like 4 or 5 o'clock, it was like, all right, I guess it's not going to happen, because we were trying to plan a recording that night. And I was like, if you don't get traded like 9 o'clock tonight, and he was like, yeah. And I was like, all right. So, I mean, definitely though, one of the most interesting situations I've ever been a part of, even in just a very small way.
Absolutely.
He was just a bat. That's why we're paused. Mitch has a game out in the
I was
background.
Like, please, Ian Happ, tie this up. They're down 3-0. I was like, 1 out in the 9th. If he tied this up right now, it would be so good.
Yeah, that'd be crazy. But it's good to hear all that perspective. I mean, like, I always sit in the left field bleachers when I go to games. I'm always out. Whenever I go out there, I live up in Madison, Wisconsin, so I don't get down to Chicago super frequently. But I'll gas him up. And he flapped his glove at me last time I was in the bleachers. President of the Ian Happ fan club, no, but self-proclaimed.
Ian Happ has been so good like this year. Like,
he's been so good.
He's one of 14 Cubs players in history to have more than 42 doubles in a season. And you look at the list, and it's like Mark Grace, Anthony Rizzo, Soriano, like those type of names, Rogers, Hornsby, like
Rogers. Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
But like,
You mean our friend Roger? I don't know who Roger is. I don't acknowledge any Rogers.
but like Derek Lee, like Aramis Ramirez is on that list. Like those are like Cubs legends, and like Ian Happ is right there with them. Like Ian Happ is having an amazing season, and I love it
for Ian that he's, you know, it was interesting last year being my first year of the podcast, as a lot of your listeners can attest, it was not the best start for Ian.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it was ironically right around when I went to visit him that when I went out there that he started turning around. I'm not saying I'm single-handedly responsible for that, but if people think it that way, I'm not going to complain.
You are.
But doing the socials, especially, man, I mean, I think, again, you go back to like, and I think that's one thing I can bring to the podcast is having worked in baseball and been in clubhouses, you realize these guys are just guys. And you would see the things people would tweet at our accounts and at Ian. And you would think that he was running a podcast 365, you know, he was like the Truman Show. He was never off air. And I was like, guys, this is something he does for an hour a week. I don't think it's the reason he's going to hit 240 or it's the reason he's going to hit 190. It's not affecting his life either. You know, if anything, it's an outlet it's a release for him, I'm sure.
Totally.
Right? He likes doing it. If anything, it's probably helping him. But you would see some of the comments, and I'm sure, I mean, you know, he's a human. I'm sure he's read some of them as well. Although I know he tries to avoid reading his mentions as much as possible. But for him to have the year he's having this year, I told the story in the pod, but it was true. I was driving to Canada the day that we found out he was an all-star. He got announced. I was literally in line at the border checkpoint. I was 3 cars away. Kyle, who's head of our socials, called me, and I hadn't really thought about like what it would mean to me, and I know it doesn't really matter what it means to me, but I hadn't thought about like, oh man, Ian's gonna be an all-star. I hadn't let myself really get there in my head because I knew it was close. Like I knew I was doing all the pushing on the line. I thought he had a good case, but you never know. And when he finally made it, and I got off that call, I was pretty emotional in the car. I was like, man, just to think about like what we were going through at this time, what he was going through at this time last year, and just the polar opposite 180 this year, it was really incredible. So that was really cool. That was a really cool moment for us as a show, but more importantly for Ian as a person. And you know, I think I changed our bio like the next week. All-star outfielder. You can never take it away now. One-time all-star doesn't matter. All-star all the same.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to take too much of your time because I know you're going to be recording with the Compound podcast right after this. Let's get into a little bit of Judge talk because like I want to get in your zone. You're a Yankees fan first. Is Judge going to do it? Is Judge going to get 62? Like I do have to mention because I have a student. His name's Max, diehard Yankee fan. And I kind of mentioned him last week. I said a student, but he said he wanted me to mention by name because he wears a Judge jersey like every day, and we talk Yanks. And I said Tom's gonna be the secret ingredient to get him to get 62. And so, is he gonna get there, Tom?
If you put a gun to my head, I would vote no at the moment, which seems crazy based on everything he's done. It's been disappointing to watch how they've been pitching him a little bit. Definitely seems like, here's a question for you guys. Can you guys name who Barry Bonds gave up Barry Bonds' 73rd homer? Can you name who gave up the 756? I mean, I would like to think all 5 of us here are probably pretty hardcore baseball fans. I don't think any of us know that off the top of our head. I just can't believe that these guys are so averse to possibly giving up a homer. You know, that was. When I went 2 Thursdays ago, when that was really one of his first opportunities to do at the stadium, it was illuminating how after that 4-pitch walk, the crowd just shifted. They were into FU mode. I don't know am I allowed to curse on this in FU mode.
Jeff
okay, well,
does all
Tom,
time,
you're a
so.
guest. Let it fly. I get scolded. Whatever.
Crowd really shifted into fuck you mode after that. I would say they were I think they went in being open minded, and then after that 4-pitch walk, it was hostile from there on out. Every time there was a ball, so as I talked about in the pod, to the point that it didn't even make sense that in 1-2 counts there would be a ball, people would boo, and I was like, well, guys, if it's a strike, that's also bad. It's actually worse. So the ball is probably the best outcome.
Yep.
But I mean, we know what you're going through a little bit, because I mean, we were all Cubs fans when Sosa was doing his thing back in the day. And so, like, I mean, I can still remember where I was sitting when Sosa hit his 62nd home run. Like, I can remember where I was sitting on the couch in my house. Like, I can remember the excitement the whole season, and you got to experience that. And it's always fun to be able to go through those highs and lows in the season and waiting anticipation. And I mean, I want, just a baseball fan, like, I want eyes on the game of baseball. And what this has done is done that. Like, the amount of middle school kids that are watching baseball in our school, because one kid's a diehard Yankees fan, he's bringing all of his friends along. Like, that's awesome. That's what I want to see. And so it's great.
The biggest thing I don't understand in social media over the last, I would say, it seems like the last week, especially as Judge has not hit 62, is that it's a lot of people just trying to tear this down and saying it's not, or accomplish. Like, there's people being like, "Oh, it's congrats on the 7th greatest home run season of all time." Well, it's like, well, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, you go look right now at the OPS plus leaders, and I know, your mileage may vary on some of those advanced statistics, but he's having one of, I'm going to look it up before we do compound. I think he's having one of, like, the 6th greatest non-Barry Bonds seasons since integration. I mean, the season he's having, regardless of whether or not he breaks the record, should be celebrated, should be, it's, again, one of the 5 or 6 greatest seasons ever in
a dead ball season.
Yeah. And in a year where the ball is dead, in a year where the ball, imagine, I saw a statistic, again, your mileage may vary, and some of the expected home runs and all that kind of stuff, but I saw a statistic that said that if projected with a normal baseball, like a typical year baseball, that Judge would be closer to 77 homers, I think was the number, than his current number. And you think about him doing this in a year where there's no homers, no one else was within 20 of him for much of the year. Yeah. And I just don't understand why there's such a need to tear it down. I think it's possible, I don't want to get into the whole Roger Maris Jr., he's saying the record's not real. The record's real. I mean, whatever you want to say about Barry Bonds, I'm not his number one fan. I think that's a discussion maybe to be had. But at the end of the day, that's the real record. And Judge is not going to break that record unless something dramatic happens. But the fact that he's going to hit 60-plus homers for the first time in over 2 decades, that's something. And the fact that he's going to at least tie the American League record, if not break it again, to me, that's something. And I don't understand this need to try to make it into, well, it's the 7th greatest home run season of all time. Okay, well, that's fine. But in the history of the American League, 2 guys have hit 61 homers. That's it. I mean, it's weird that all the other guys played in the National League. I agree. But that's a fact of what's happened. And I don't understand why we need to everyone wants to compare everything. Let's just enjoy this season for what it is,
Yeah, I mean, where baseball is at right now, you have Shohei, there's so many things going right for baseball right now, and it kind of feels like the lockout has been just forgotten, which is great. Like, we've moved past it, and it's a good time for, I think, youth to get back in baseball. And what you guys are doing at Jomboy is only helping that. So, like, we appreciate what you guys do, what you do with the compound of allowing us to hear a little bit of a player perspective. Like, it's great as like fellow podcasters. Like, we love that. Like, we love what you guys do and what you guys do at Jomboy. So just thank you for doing that for baseball and for baseball fans and listeners everywhere. Like, it's great.
I'm just a very small part in the big machine, but I do appreciate that. I do think that's something we talk about. We're trying, it's good for us. We have a shirt. Baseball is fun. That's kind of our motto. Jimmy's always, preaching, not trying to be funny, not trying to just have fun. And if you have fun, that comes across on camera. I think that's kind of one of our core beliefs here. And I think you see that with Compound. I think a lot of times we're just 4 guys trying to make the other people laugh, trying to have a good time. And so what's better than talking about baseball, and that's all we want to do. And we hope to keep doing it for a long time.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. We won't want to take any more of your time because we know you're recording with the compound. Say hi to the compound guys for us.
I
Say
will.
we love
I'll see, maybe 200 episodes. We can get one of them on.
Yeah.
Actually get a real podcast host instead of just.
I'll get a cake twice as big next time.
That's right. I have to tell them about you eating the cake. I mean, that would get anyone. I would certainly want to watch that.
Yeah.
I'm a champion.
All right. Well, thanks, Tom. Where can they find you on social medias if they need to hook up with you?
I don't think anyone's ever needed social media, but if you for some reason feel inclined to follow me, it is at T Prizeman, Prizeman on all platforms. So
awesome. All right. Well, thanks for joining us tonight, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Later. Well, let's talk some Cubs baseball because Cubs are hot in the streets, boys. They've won 7 in a row until the loss tonight. So they did take the L tonight. That's all right. But I gotta switch these cameras around. There we go. But it's been fun, man. The second half has been a ton of fun to watch Cubs baseball. And I went through a stretch where I will say that I struggled watching, and that's when they started getting hot and they started playing some fun baseball. And I mean, let's just look at the records. Cubs are 50-46 since July 17th. And you think about that. And if they had 100 more games to the season, let's say that was the start of the season was July 17th, and they had like close to 100 more games left or like 80 games left. Do you think they would make the playoffs? Do you think they would catch the Brewers?
Probably.
I got to think they'd catch the Brewers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Brewers are right there knocking on the door for the playoffs. I mean, they've struggled lately and they've lost quite a bit, but like,
especially if it's a post-trade deadline Brewers where they got rid of their closer. Yeah, I think Cubs got it.
I mean, they're winners of 39 out of the last 68. And that would put them on pace for 93 wins in the season if they kept that pace up for 162.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And one thing that Tom said that stood out to me that I thought it's something that I've been thinking about. He mentioned Adrian Sampson, and the way that he got there was kind of weird. He kind of like jumped to it, but once I understood what he was talking about, I was like, oh yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, Adrian Sampson has been talked about on every Cubs podcast that I've listened to over the last month-ish. It started with oh, hey, did you guys notice that Adrian Sampson is doing this? And now it's like, oh, we need Adrian Sampson in the rotation next year. You're like, he should be our 5 or a 6. It's like, if he's the 6 or 7 and he is pitching to this level, great, phenomenal. And I know that this performance kind of started last season, but sorry, man, still color me very skeptical. Yep. I haven't looked into the StatCast statistics, but I don't really. I feel like if I pulled it up right now, I wouldn't see peripherals that really back up what he's doing. I don't know, man. It's been great, but yes, if Adrian Sampson pitched like this all season and we had 100 more games, yeah, Cubs are going to the playoffs, right? And Stroman, how about Stroman taking off, right?
Holy smokes!
I mean, it's kind of nuts over the past couple months that with Hendricks hitting the IL. I remembered the other day that Alec Mills exists.
Yeah,
you're right.
My favorite player.
Hendricks and Mills. I'm not surprised. Jeff is, just a down to earth, salt of the earth guy. But it's very weird that to me that those two guys, Hendricks and Mills, have largely been out of the rotation or not really contributing when they were in the rotation, and we still have in the second half one of the best starting rotations in the league.
Miley hasn't pitched hardly at all.
Yeah,
Hendricks hasn't pitched at all. I mean, Stroman has ended the season yesterday, 6 shutout innings. In his last 16 outings, he has a 2.56 ERA dating back to July 9th. Since then, he has been just crazy good. And you look at the Cubs starters. What do you think their ERA has been the second half?
I think I know it.
2.63.
It was in the ones, I think. Was it just under?
No, that'd be insane.
The second half ERA is 2.95.
I'm thinking
I was gonna say 8.5, yeah, but yeah, that's crazy. And then what is that? Was that good for like fifth or sixth?
I think it was third or fourth.
Okay.
I think only the Dodgers and one other team.
Astros.
Yeah, one of them had a better.
That wouldn't be
I remember seeing
surprising.
that graphic. They pulled it up on Marquee, and the Cubs were third
And
in there.
I
Oh, the
remember
Braves are
that.
probably
Yeah,
on there
Braves.
too.
But I remember saying this from like the very beginning of the season, like when our starting pitching is good, this team isn't that far off. Like I've said it over and over, like our starting pitching, because at the beginning of the season when we had Stroman go down for that time, we had Miley gone, and it was at the time where Steele was still trying to find who he was, and Thompson was bouncing back and forth between middle reliever and starter. Like they started figuring things out together, and now we got a pretty good staff. Now, like you said, Adrian Sampson, I don't think he's gonna. I mean, if he's the 6th, 7th guy, great. But the thing that the Cubs have is they have a surplus of starting pitching, and they're going to go get some more. And that's what you need for a 162 game season, because they're not going to pitch every single game or every single spot in the rotation. I mean, Tom talked a little bit about Ian Happ. Like that dude has been so good. He has 61 extra base hits. If you total doubles and triples, he has 44 total plus 17 home runs. Last year, he had 46 extra base hits, 21 doubles and triples combined, and 25 home runs. So you see his home run going down, but his doubles, like he's just a doubles machine out there. He reminds me of Aramis Ramirez, like back in the day, like just constantly getting those doubles and driving in runs. Like his OPS is up. Like he's doing the things that you need for a good corner outfielder. And when you pair him with Seiya, like Seiya's been just absolutely on fire lately. And so like, he's the guy who we expected all along. Jeff, what are your thoughts on Seiya going into next year? Are you like super high? Like right now he has a 990 OPS in the last 28 games.
I'm high on him for next year. I mean, I hope you see it a lot where, guys will have like a breakout star when they're coming into the league, and then the next year it's like a sophomore slump. Because I think people figure out how to pitch to him in the off season, and there's a little bit more film on him, so they can game plan a little bit better. But I'm looking for him to be even better than he was this year.
Yeah, I think he did so well adjusting the second time. His first adjustment took some time, and then he got injured in the middle of it. And then this second adjustment didn't take him very long at all for him to bounce back from what the league was throwing at him. And it kind of seems like I haven't seen him really struggle with velocity like what everybody kind of assumed he would.
He's been more struggling with off speed.
Yeah, and I think it's like manipulation or like seeing the arm angles and stuff like that, and kind of picking the ball up when it's coming to him. But seeing that second adjustment not take very long for him to just snap onto it and just go to town batting. I'm really excited to see our corner infielders. Like both of them are rock solid.
Outfielders,
sorry.
Yeah,
corner infielders. We need to go get some.
Yeah, no.
Did you mean to reference the Bleacher Nation article that came out earlier today? Because they talked about Seiya and Happ specifically.
There was a conversation. I saw the title. I haven't read it yet.
So basically, the question is, do you know how many teams have two outfielders with at least 400 plate appearances and a WRC plus over 120 this season? Just 6 in all of MLB, and one of them is the Cubs with Happ and Seiya Suzuki. And then there was something else like, the Astros, Yordan Alvarez has only played 55 games in the outfield. He's primarily a DH. So whether or not you really consider him a corner outfielder, like that could narrow it down to 5. And it happens. So this goes back to what Tom said, like Cubs fans love Ian Happ. And the fact that he has the compound, he's like personified himself even more. Like he's broken down that barrier of like pro athlete and fan, because like Tom also mentioned, like when you listen to a podcast, you feel like you're part of like family, like that. I hope our listeners feel that way with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because Hap has done that and has ingrained himself in the community, like Ian Happ does deserve a Gold Glove, man. 2 sliding plays in one game last week. Like I know I tweeted about it, like that was nuts. But like I think losing Hap because we have the compound and because we've like gotten to listen to him every week now for 2.5 years, that one might hurt the most. Like because that really
you feel
signals,
like you know him.
Yeah, and it really signals the end of an era. But like the other thing that people brought up, like as long as we're talking about Suzuki, they signed Suzuki, who's a little bit old. I think he's like maybe like a month or two older than Hap. They signed Suzuki to this longer term contract. If you're going to sign a guy who's that age, why wouldn't you sign Hap, who's the same age, and a guy who developed in your system into an all-star and had a huge breakout season this year? Like, why would you not want to keep him in the clubhouse? Like, I'm never going to be like, I don't think I'll ever be the guy on Twitter anymore that, does hashtag extend so-and-so because like it just broke my heart last year. Mm-hmm. But like, I am absolutely team extend Ian Happ. Like it makes all the sense in the world.
We saw the last series at Wrigley and we saw Wrigley packed out. Do you think because we've had such a good second half and a lot of wins and that fans are starting to see around the corner and starting to get excited again? Like what's the pulse of Cubs Nation? Do you think they're starting? Cause like, I get a sense that like, I mean, you even look at like our listener numbers, like they're for July and part of August, it dipped down and now it's starting to pick back up and like, attendance like Wrigley dipped down, it was pretty low and now it's like back up. I know it's the end of the year, but like I get a sense even like in Cubs Twitter that like there's more optimism, there's more like looking forward to the future. Like what are your thoughts, Jeff? Like are you back in? Like
yeah, I got I kind of was out in way left field for a little bit during this season because it wasn't exciting to watch them, and to make them watch like little league type errors was just driving me nuts. But what's been exciting is see these young kids come up and play very well, and they've strung together enough wins. I think people are like, hey, they're not so bad, there's something there. If you looked at the stands tonight in Cincinnati, there's nobody there,
and Wrigley was packed for all 3 games,
right?
For a team that's not going to make the playoffs. Granted, both the Reds and Cubs aren't going to make the playoffs, but
I think that tells you a little bit of state of where the organizations are at. Like Cincinnati, like people don't see around the corner and see that there is hope and optimism. They see like, well, here we go. Like the Cubs
we're shitty again.
Our minor leagues have won a championship and they were in another championship. Like we got some guys coming up and we have money. Like they can kind of sense a little bit of difference. I even was talking to an older gentleman yesterday and he was even saying, he's like, I stopped watching for June and July. And now I've started picking back up. And I even watched some of the marquee when they had the minor league games on. It's like, yes, like get excited because there is some great things in the minor leagues and great things coming forward. Like, yep, right there. 2023 NL Central Champs.
I think so. Like I had my friends texting. We were texting about the other day. Like how do we feel about the team next year? And like I tweeted about it after we won 6 in a row. I think that I said I feel very and sure enough, Greg Zumock also tweeted. He tweeted the same thing that I did. Like 20 minutes later, we both feel really, really good about the Cubs going into next year, even before any free agent acquisitions. Like,
yep.
I think that there's kind of like in the back of my mind, like, oh, the Cubs will make signings. And like, that's something that I think we should talk about quickly here as we wrap things up. Like Cubs fans, I don't really think anybody's like upset about winning right now anymore because it's been fun to end the season. But like, I know at some point there were people saying like, why are we winning? We need better. We need to like get our draft capital up. Like, no, trust in this front office to be able to develop the prospects like we have been over the past year and a half and scout correctly and just have fun and understand that the games like playing now, I think Nico said, was quoted like, us winning now is auditioning for free agents to join us this offseason. And I think that's exactly how we should be watching the last 2 games here as Cubs fans.
Yep. I will say I don't want Carlos Correa. I'm going to say that over and over.
I'd rather have Turner, but I'm not going to be upset if we get Correa. I know what you're saying. I think he's kind of a diva, but like, damn. I mean, come on.
I do want to end the podcast of giving one little shout out to Wilson Contreras. And we got to Wrigley Field, got to say possibly goodbye to Willie and what he brought to the organization. Thank you, Willie, for everything you've done. You've been a class act for the Cubs. You've been a great mentor to so many young players. Like this year, just seeing you, like I was never like a diehard Wilson Contreras. Like we need to extend him, and he's like the face of the franchise. But like what he did this year, like I didn't ever see that he had that in him of being the mentor and being the leader that he was and is. I guess I just never saw it, but like this year you really get to see that in him, that he is a leader and people are drawn to him. And he wasn't so, I just viewed him before as a big energy guy, and you kind of saw him more reserved and more as a leader and a veteran. You kind of saw that switch get flipped. And I mean, I don't want to get into the statistics of, does he get the calls? Is he a great pitch framer to help pitchers? But what he does behind the scenes and all the little intangibles, other than that, like he's great. And I think he pairs great with Yan Gomes. But if this is the last hurrah for Willie, thank you for everything you did, bring us the championship. Same with Jason Hayward. Didn't do so much on the field, but if you read his piece today on the Players Tribune, like his article, like he's a good dude. Like
it was
classy
great.
Guy.
Definitely read it. Especially if you didn't care for Jay Hay, read it and share it with people that you know didn't care for Jay Hay, because the guy's got a great heart.
I mean, Jeff is one of those. So Jeff, read the article. I'll share it to you.
I'll read it.
I mean, I was just as frustrated you as any Cubs fan of him hitting it at second base. We can't make those jokes anymore. But he's a good dude, and wish him nothing but the best going forward. He might come back as a coach someday or work in the organization. He even mentioned that in his article.
Assistant hitting instructor.
Maybe not that, but quality assurance. That's a good position for him.
There you go.
Kevin, you got a problem?
Huh? But this is our 100th episode. We made it. Jeffrey ate his whole cake.
In 13 minutes. Holy smokes.
Kevin has to pee really bad. And
I just like to
so I'm
add
just going to keep talking and see how long it takes.
Yeah. So I would like to add how I got onto the pod. It was a Wednesday at CrossFit. And back then we always did these long 40-minute chipper workouts. So for those of you who aren't familiar with CrossFit or what a chipper workout is, it's like a five movement workout where you work like start with 10, you go to 20, 30, 40, 50 reps is right in the middle, and then you work your way back down the ladder. I'm halfway through and Mitch comes up and tries to talk to me about starting a podcast. I'm like, that's great. Just go away. I'm dying. And then they let me on.
Yeah. And your very first one was that
I did trivia.
You asked us trivia.
Yeah,
and I destroyed Kevin.
He did.
Yes.
Kevin sucks at trivia.
And
you're drinking more water, Kevin?
And listeners liked you, and we decided to have you on. And then
that's right.
We had Jake on for an interview, and we loved him, and
we kept him.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
it's been an honor.
So
Jake's been fantastic.
Awesome. Well, here's to another 100, and thanks guys for joining this ride. I mean, it's fun, and that's why I kind of started just talk Cubs baseball, and the amount of people that we've got to interact with and get to know in interviews that we've had that I could have never dreamed of interviewing Cubs players or broadcasters or going to Field of Dreams and getting to meet play. Like it's a cool ride, and it's fun to do this as a hobby and have some fun and not take it so seriously. And thanks for listening if you are out there, and here's to 100 more. So that does it for episode 100 of the. Oh yeah, we got to talk about the dinger picks.
Yeah, Joey brought it up.
Joey, thank
I
you.
got
The
this.
dinger picks. We are tied with 2 games left. Jeff and Kevin. I don't know how we're gonna do this for a tiebreaker. If you guys tie, we might have to extend this into the playoffs and pick 2 teams that are playing, and you have to pick. Like that might be the only way.
How about we wrestle in a gravel parking lot?
Nope, I refuse that. Jeff is a much bigger dude than I am.
But Jeff and Kevin, like Jeff came back from deep. He
I was
10
in the basement by myself, graffitiing the walls, and all of a sudden I made it to the penthouse.
Yep.
If you guys tie, you both pick a team in the playoffs to win the World Series. Whichever team goes the furthest, that's the dinger winner.
I want them to pick dingers. How about they pick
So
one team and they have
how
to?
do you do that though? How do you do that? Whichever team hits the most, you can't do that because like whatever team makes it further is probably gonna hit more home runs.
Right.
That's true.
We'll sell this off air.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Apparently
that does it
Kevin
for
has to go to the
episode
bathroom.
100 of the Dingers podcast. Thanks for listening.